This is an Eastern Pennsylvania Continuum of Care coordinated entry training for CE specialists. This training is titled Safety Planning for Survivors, a training for mainstream homeless service providers. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat and we will make sure they are addressed by the end of the training. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our trainers today from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I'm going to hand it to Heather to get us started.
Okay, there we go. It wasn't letting me unmute. Hi, everybody. My name's Heather Tierney. I am one of the housing system specialists here at PCADV. And on the call, we have D. Fox and Kanoa Ask Your Niece, and we collectively make up the housing systems team at PCADV. And I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, great. Okay, so today we're going to be going over some safety planning for survivors, and this is a training that's really geared towards mainstream providers, access specialists, folks that work in like the mainstream field that do come in contact with domestic violence survivors. Okay, and this is just a slide that kind of talks about our housing systems team and just some expertise that we have. I don't know if Kanoa, do you want to come off mute and say something about your expertise and what you bring to your roles?
Yeah, sure, Heather. Thank you. Kanoa Askernes with PCADV, as Heather mentioned, part of the housing systems team, specifically housing systems specialist as the role. Previous to PCADV, I did come from a direct service provider, but also have, several years of social service and nonprofit work. So continuing to, kind of stay in that with working with individuals and supporting the community at large. So happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Kanoa, for the direction. Heather, too. I'm Debbie Fox. I also go by D Fox, and I am the Housing Systems Manager at PCADV, and I've been in the housing and domestic and sexual violence related field for over 30 years now, and have a lot of expertise in that area. I'll be supporting the team in the chat and answering questions as we go along. And I also encourage you all to say hello in the chat and tell us where you're from and where you work, and we can go ahead and get started. So I'll pass it back to Heather so we can get going.
Thank you, Dee and Kanoa. Okay, so just a quick tidbit about PCADV. So PCADV is a statewide coalition. We represent 59 member programs throughout the Eastern and Western CoCs. We are a pass-through funder. So essentially, we do apply for funds and distribute them to our member programs. And with that comes some training, a technical assistant, some admin roles, fiscal oversight funding, and all of this works together with our programs to support survivors. This results in roughly about 90,000 survivors that are being provided confidential services throughout the Commonwealth. And also our training team, our housing advocacy, our systems level engagement, it extends beyond PA. Recently, our team has presented nationally on VAWA, fair housing, housing first practices, and increasing awareness of economic justice for survivors. We're leaders in the field as our housing work is considered a national model for survivors. Right, and this slide just kind of talks about like the why, the correlation between domestic violence and homelessness. Some studies have found that homeless mothers with children, 80% of them have previously experienced domestic violence or are currently experiencing DV. And then studies also show that as many as 57% of all homeless women report DV as the immediate cause of the homelessness. And then just some need for survivor housing and systems coordination. So just in the Eastern CoC, around 400 requests for DV shelter in the CoC are denied each year. Obviously, we all know shelter is a huge need right now in PA, not just DV, but in the mainstream world as well. Around just under 3,000 households out of around 8,600 households that are seeking resources through the PACOC were survivors of DV. And then on average, across both the East and Western COCs, nearly 40% of all the households experiencing homelessness are also fleeing DV as well. So it really kind of shows that need for the two systems to work hand in hand and why partnerships with the VSPs are really important. And I'm going to pass it over to Kanoa.
Oh, thank you, Heather, for getting us started off. Yeah, so we just wanted to, this is going to be a refresher for you all. We know that this is part of the training that you all are provided from the CoC, but just to kind of level set, the Category 4 definition under VAWA states that an individual or a family who is experiencing trauma or lack of safety due to fleeing or attempting to flee. And the domestic violence includes domestic violence itself, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and then other dangerous, traumatic, or life-threatening conditions that are related to violence against the individual or the family member. And within the actual individual or family's current residence as well. And that situation can either take place in or that they are afraid to return to, right? Their primary place of residence. And then two other criteria that an individual will need to meet to be eligible under Category 4 for your coordinated entry system would be that they have no other safe residence and that they lack the supports to obtain safe and permanent housing. And then this link will be available for you to click and get some more information on it once we share it out. Next slide. So just some points to pull out with regard to VAWA. We want to make sure that that you all know that survivors should not be denied housing or be evicted because of their domestic violence status, right? Which can include, again, that dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. With VAWA, there is also the right to report, which includes that, not being able to be denied or retaliated against, right, for reporting their situation under domestic violence. But then also emergency transfers, right? They have the right to request that and to be relocated to a location that is safer than the unit that they're currently in. And with the emergency transfers, we want to make sure that you all know, and if you are hearing, right, that you are sharing that information, that folks are being told that they need to be in good standing at their current program or in their current residence. That is not something that, VAWA upholds, right? We want to make sure that that emergency transfer is available whenever it is requested. And then survivors cannot be discriminated against regardless on their survivorship. Next slide. And then here, just some shared language, right? We understand that there's a lot of nuance when it comes to the domestic violence and human trafficking definition, right? So we just want to make sure that we all are clear that domestic violence can include physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, psychological aggression, which can include coercive tactics. And then this is going to be by a current or former intimate partner, which can include a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, dating partner, or an ongoing sexual partner. And then domestic violence in and of itself denotes the pattern of behavior used to gain and maintain power and control over another, right? Whereas intimate partner abuse can encompass all violence that occurs in a current or former intimate relationship, and both are under the mission of PCADV funded organizations. And then when we look to identify what falls under human trafficking, It can be anything that, well, first of all, it is considered a crime, right? And it involves compelling or coercing a person to provide labor or services, and they can, or encouraging them to engage in commercial sex acts using fear, fraud, force, or coercion. And then, just to note that exploitation of a minor for commercial sex or human trafficking does not need to involve any of those criteria, that force, fraud, or coercion. In and of itself, commercial sex where a minor is going to be considered human trafficking. So we understand that there's a lot of nuance that comes along with that. So we just want to make sure that you all are referring to your domestic violence organization when at all possible. Next slide. And so how can you help survivors plan for safety while they're working to secure safe and stable housing? We always like to acknowledge the numerous barriers that survivors face as they are looking to either keep or establish their housing, safe housing, that is. And in doing that, they are often forced to, devise unsafe arrangements, live in danger, potentially, living street homeless, rather than, in that previous location or residence, or even returning to the abusive partner just so that they have a place to sleep. And VSPs can be considered a life-saving support, right, and resource to countless survivors. But we also like to acknowledge that communities and programs also lack the full capacity, right, to help every survivor with their housing needs. So that's where you all come in. And, the reason why we're here today to increase your knowledge and awareness on how to help survivors plan for that immediate safety, so that you can provide that confidential and trauma-informed assessment and the housing services that are meaningful, safe, and grounded in the best practices for the survivor. Next slide. And then again, just to kind of falls under the category 4 definition. We want to make sure that the phrase, right, dangerous or life-threatening condition is not, does not dictate the level of danger that a survivor is experiencing, right? The phrase in and of itself, and which is included in the definition, should not be construed to describe the level of violence, right, that's needed for a survivor to be considered homeless. HUD in and of itself defines that interpersonal violence in and of itself is inherently dangerous, right? And it should be considered as such when you are considering the category 4 eligibility. And then one last thing to note is that HUD does not add parameters or does not have parameters around when abuse or violence has occurred to be eligible under category 4. And next slide. So what does fleeing mean? The concept of fleeing will obviously look different for every survivor because every situation is going to be different, right? Every survivor is different, therefore every situation is going to be different. So the guidance that is provided by a domestic violence advocate or housing provider can help the survivor identify if their situation would be eligible under category 4, right? We don't want to be making those determinations. We want to believe a survivor when they tell us that they are a survivor, they are a victim. And just as a point of reference, and this is something that, you have these slides, so this is something you can definitely refer back to, but some questions that you can ask as you're fielding, that with folks that you're engaging with. By asking, did someone do something that made you feel unsafe, right? Do you feel like you needed to leave your current residence because you were unsafe, or did you leave your current living situation to stay safe, right? It was no longer safe within the residence, so you fled that situation for your safety. Did someone make you do or make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable in order to remain in the home, right? So therefore you fled. Do you feel unsafe to return the home that you left, or are you worried about any other children or dependents or pets that still remain in that home? Are just a few questions that you can ask. And next slide. You're having some tech issues, Heather. I can keep going. So, how can you help with immediate safety? We want to make sure that you are utilizing your VSP agency and partner, either by referral or consultation. Best practice is a proactive approach, right? Connecting prior to, if it all possible, and having policies in place with your local victim service provider to identify, well, prior to, right, an emergency happening. When you are assessing someone, discussing their situation, we just want to encourage you not to judge or restrict the level of contact the survivor might need with the intimate partner, especially if it relates to custody and familial obligation. And I think you'll take over now.
Sorry, again, it wasn't letting me come off mute. Gotta love technology. So just to kind of round it into the next slide. So like, how can you help with immediate safety when you're coming into contact with folks that are coming to be assessed for coordinated entry services? Some of the kinds of planning necessary just to ensure working together with the survivor. These are just some examples. Finding out some information sharing you might need to do. Is that going to pose any risk? So sharing with maybe like the local VSP or community partners that they might be seeking services from. The location of the housing unit that they're searching in, would it be safe for the survivor? And it's important to give the survivor the autonomy to decide that for themselves, right? Because maybe in an area where maybe the only area they can afford is 5 blocks away from the abusive partner, and we think to ourselves, that's not safe, right? But it's ultimately the survivor's decision on where they feel safe residing. Some visits and appointments, so doctor's appointments, anything in the community. Are there safety issues coming or going safely? Are there any stalking concerns or things like that? Which goes into phone messages, emails, texts. Is anybody monitoring their devices? In this digital age, that's something that we see a lot more frequently. So it is important to be aware of the kinds of information that we're sharing or emailing our survivors. And then just being seen by someone that the survivor might know while receiving services, maybe a friend of the abusive partner or a family member. How would they want to handle that potential interaction, or if that person sees them coming to receive services? Another important thing to consider would be police involvement should be survivor-led. There may be times that the survivor discloses something where you feel maybe you need to contact the police. Only the survivor is going to know if it's warranted or if that could even escalate the situation further. Sometimes we see that things like police involvement or PFAs can escalate the situation. So it's really important for the survivor to have the autonomy to make that choice for themselves. And then just understanding the abusive partner's role in the survivor's life. Do they have visitation with the children? Are they the primary babysitter or transportation? Or have they been sabotaging the survivor's efforts to obtain or maintain housing? So all these things are really important to factor in when we're doing some safety planning. And then this slide really talks about more, the why of this high-level safety planning. So in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy, safety planning is something that really does go hand in hand with a risk or lethality assessment. And those really require specific training to just properly administer. A lot of our all of our DV and SA advocates undergo rigorous training to be able to do these assessments. So they receive many hours of training, they have a lot of experience working within this field, and they can effectively and confidently discuss these risks and safety measures. Now, while they handle a lot of in-depth, comprehensive safety planning, your roles, you should be equipped to discuss some high-level immediate safety planning just to help them around their housing search until they can be connected to a local VSP. And then also one thing we wanted to highlight was just maybe consider attending your local VSP's 40-hour domestic violence training. A lot of our organizations host, whether that's quarterly or biannually, different programs have different like training schedules, but they'll host a 40-hour training if you're interested in learning more on the nuances of DV. All right, Kanoa?
Just kind of going into a little bit of what a warm handoff could entail, or some best practices or benefits, right behind warm handoffs. We do understand that right on the front end, that you may not have that direct referral option, right? But for those who are in access sites, or you're a mainstream provider, you may have that opportunity to do so. So we just wanted to provide some language and information on that. So a warm handoff is more than just a referral, right, to another provider. It's actually an extension, right, of a service that you can provide to that survivor. Right. It's a thoughtful process that identifies the need for additional assistance and support while giving the survivor options, right? And autonomy as well, right? Because you can make a referral, but there's no guarantee that they're going to necessarily reach out to it. But you want to be able to provide us an assistance, right? Even if you're unable to meet their, especially, right, if you're unable to meet their immediate or presenting needs. And it's a critical practice to ensure that survivors have access to the community resources that are available to them, right? Informing them of what is available within their community, whether they, reach out at that time, that point in time or not. They will know, right? They'll have that knowledge that that resource is available within their community and can reach out, when the time warrants for them. And then, just to kind of, reframe your perspective on, the benefit or conducting a warm handoff, right? Not offering a warm handoff could be a missed opportunity to provide a comprehensive level of support to help that individual navigate their situation. But it can also be an opportunity to build trust, right? Either with that individual, to establish that trust, with yourself, as the one working directly with that individual, or reestablishing trust, right, with either your organization or another organization or a system. Sorry. And yeah, so another benefit to that as well is, if you're unable to provide a resource, right, and turning someone away and, just simply saying, that's out of my, realm of, expertise, or, out of the scope of work that we do, that could leave a survivor feeling overwhelmed or abandoned, right, in their navigation of their situation. So we don't want that to happen. So this practice will help a survivor with an added level of support, right, as they navigate their situation. And the process is pretty simple. It just entails, identifying when a warm handoff may be necessary, right? So for an individual, and like I mentioned, they have maybe more needs beyond, your scope of work, but you also want to provide an additional option. You are also recognizing their experience and responding to their needs, right? Sometimes when you're asking someone about their situation, they may provide additional insight onto something else that they're dealing with. That's an opportunity for you to share a resource that you may know of. And again, we discuss respecting their autonomy and also their personal priorities, because what we may identify as a priority or something of importance, may not look the same for that individual. So we want to, give them that respect and that opportunity to make the decision themselves. And then again, connecting them with those additional supports, resources, and services. You're not only equipping the survivor on, the resources that are available as you, seek information out by your cross sector partners. As we mentioned, those proactive kind of interactions or contacts prior to the need being there, right? It will give you an opportunity to be a little bit more knowledgeable as well on what resources are available through a certain partner. Next slide. So this is a kind of interactive part of the presentation here. We wanted to know how you all define self-care. We understand that the work that you all do is, it's tough work, right? So we want to make sure that you all are caring for yourselves. So we wanted to just take the last few slides to just identify that. So if you wanted to either put how you would define self-care into the chat, or even some ideas on, what you may do to practice self-care. And as you all chime in and do that, how we define self-care is as a practice of taking care, taking an action rather to preserve or improve your own health, right? So often we are just working with individuals, and we want to make sure we're caring for ourselves as well. And it involves recognizing your needs and taking the steps to meet those needs. And it can include physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual aspects of practices.
Thank you, Kanoa. And just to kind of round it out and just reiterate what Kanoa was just mentioning, we wanted to close out the presentation just highlighting your work and that you're doing, especially in these trying times. Working with survivors and in the homeless field, it can be really traumatic, right? We've all heard the term vicarious trauma, and we just wanted to make sure that we're acknowledging that this can be really stressful work, right? So some examples of some self-care, I can't see the chat. I'm sure there were some great suggestions in there. Some things could be, reading, writing, journaling, going out in nature, doing some outdoor hobbies, exercise, meditation. One thing that I like to do is a start of the day and an end of the day routine, right? Taking the last couple minutes of the day to just close out everything. I like to just kind of reorganize my desk, get everything refreshed for the next day so I can come in with a nice fresh start and not feel stressed. Kind of like if you're like me, I don't like leaving dishes in the sink at night, so I'm not stressed in the morning. Just, little things that you can do to just take care of yourself and prioritize your mental health. Big advocate of taking a mental health day or utilizing that PTO. I know in these times it feels like if we take some time off, the workload is going to pile up, and that's inevitable. That's going to happen, but we need to be prioritizing time for ourselves and just doing something that makes you happy and resting and resetting where we can. And then these are just some reasons why self-care matters. Some normal responses to frequent exposures of traumatic situations, they can manifest in so many ways, like emotional, behavioral, affecting your personal relationships, even manifesting in physical symptoms. Stress can literally make us sick, impacting your relationship with peers or clients. And all of these can be really harmful to you, impacting feelings of safety and just impact the mental well-being of you and your clients. So we really want folks to focus on self-care, taking care of themselves. And then just to round us out, these are some resource links that you'll be able to access when Jason sends out the slides. They're just some more resources around safety planning and some self-care resources. Another attachment that you're going to receive with the slides, our systems team developed a one-pager safety plan document for the 211 call specialist that has been pretty well received. So it's a great visual guide that you can do to help guide the conversation and maybe have some of those immediate safety questions that you can ask of your clients, your survivors that you're working with, just until they can be connected to a VSP for that more comprehensive safety planning. So you'll get all of these resources. And then any questions? And I can't see the chat. So if there's any questions in the chat, Dee, if you want to shout them out.
No questions, but some folks did share some of their self-care practices, which are breathing exercises, meditation, taking a day off during the middle of the week to do some self-meditation. And then I see Leslie has her hand up.
Go ahead, Leslie. Oh,
Well, I
thank
I
you.
need to unmute everyone. Should we end the recording
Yeah,
and
so
open it up
real
to
quick before
discussion?
we end the recording, this last slide has mine, Kanoa's, and Dee's emails. And if you ever want to email us, feel free to email us. And then the last email is for our entire PCADV housing team. You could reach us anytime. Right, now you can end the recording.
And thank you to our presenters.